I really am sorry, though, just so you know.
Okay, I get it. It's okay. You know what'd be really great, though? If maybe you call me up, you ask me for coffee, we go out to dinner, something like that.
Yeah, no, we'll do that.
Okay, great. Or we could just do this again in 5 years.
Okay, man.
It's all right.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Okay.
How you been?
Good, man. That's very nice for you to ask. Okay?
All right, yeah.
All right. Jesus.
This week, I want to talk about a podcast that changed the career of not only a comedian, but also changed the entire podcast genre as we know it. And that is Marc Maron's 2010 interview with Louis C.K. In 2010, people may have heard of podcasts. I know my parents had not, but they were kind of this vague notion that, maybe some nerdy people enjoyed, but they were not part of the mainstream. I actually started my own podcast in 2011.
Hi, how are you guys? My name is indeed Eric Berry, and this is Full Disclosure.
And it had to do with the genre a little bit, which was sex and dating. But I was having legit porn stars and adult performers, sexologists, biologists over to my apartment to interview them. And, understandably, they were like, what am I coming to your apartment to do? So it did require a lot of explanation. And certainly in 2010, I don't think that podcasts were thought of as a mainstream form of media. It is interesting to think that in 2011 it was kind of a joke if you said, a comedian has a podcast, and it was a joke. So it was like, oh my God, every comedian has a podcast. And this is 14 years ago. Forget 2019, forget 2023, forget now in 2025, where now my parents each have their own podcast. But this was an episode that brought podcasting and the way that it could be an intimate form of conversation and to connect with people really to the forefront in a way that, late night shows or perhaps like an NPR interview was not doing. These were long form interviews. They were unscripted interviews, and they were emotionally raw.
We had our friendship faded away at some point, and I had time when I was writing you emails to connect with you personally.
Yeah.
And you ignored me.
Really?
Yeah, for a long time. For, I don't know, over a year.
Really?
Longer than that, yeah. You just wouldn't answer me, and I would write emails that said, I'm not sure why you're not writing me back, but I'm going to persist because our friendship goes back far enough.
Right, I remember that.
Saving.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't answer me.
What the fuck was my problem?
At some point, I caught you on the phone, and you said that you felt like when we talk, it's just about me, and I don't really listen to you, that I'm very self-centered.
Right.
And I took that to heart, but I also thought, well, I felt like it was unfair. And so when I tried, and after that, I tried still to pursue you. You didn't want to talk to me. So, in this round, when you were trying to get me to be on your podcast, or you're trying to connect with me, part of me was going, fuck him. I don't, if he doesn't want to be my friend, I'm not going
to. But we had the conversation. We made up.
Yeah, but it didn't make us start connecting. It didn't.
Was the plan to start connecting? But then you got very busy. So. You got very busy.
For those of you who aren't familiar with WTF, it's a podcast hosted by Marc Maron that started in 2009, and it was sort of an evolution from his old Air America radio show that Maron started because he had gotten fired from Air America, and I think the first few episodes they actually recorded in the Air America studios because they still had keycard access. And eventually they brought it into his garage. The show has certainly evolved over the years, but I'll say kind of the heart of it was that it was Marc Maron speaking with people from his life, largely comedians in the beginning, and interviewing them, but also kind of just working out his personal shit with them because he had had a history of rubbing people the wrong way and wanted to kind of work things out on the mics with people. Previously produced terrestrial radio had been very polished. Howard Stern obviously changed that, creating a very raw environment.
You know about sexual predators and things like that. I mean,
you are one.
All right, I was going to say that, but it's true.
In terms of the unfiltered format, unbleeped, anything goes. There's not a producer who's driving the content of what's happening. Marc Maron's podcast was really one of the first to do that. This is Joe Rogan, I believe, had started his podcast at that point.
Start broadcast. And then
update to Twitter.
But it was a different thing, right? This was clearly coming from an emotionally vulnerable need on Marc Maron's part to connect with people. And it worked. It resonated with the audience. It felt like you were getting a peek inside the mind and the heart and these private conversations between two people. As an aside, I think that was a very different era of podcasting that can't and maybe shouldn't really exist now, because everyone does watch podcasts. They listen to podcasts. It's not exactly a safe space to speak about issues you might be having with people in your life and with your family, which is very much what Marc Maron did, because now podcasts are mainstream media, and these aren't intimate details that might not get back to people, right? You kind of have a certain degree of responsibility with what this is now.
Things started getting really bad. Like, things immediately started getting bad. And then the 90s came and all the clubs started closing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make a living anymore, and I couldn't pay my rent. Like, that night was a huge, instant turning point. Everything from that night on in my life went badly.
Yeah.
For like 3-4 years.
I've always believed that, despite what you think, I think of you, that, out of anybody I know, and I've always said this, that if anybody, has the capacity to create, some genius in this fucking game, you're the guy.
Oh,
that,
thanks.
Because your work ethic is unique, and you very consciously let things get so fucking bad for yourself in order to see if you can rise from it. That's always been this weird ethic you had. That even when you were like, I remember one time in that fucking Chelsea apartment that you were surrounded by garbage. I mean, real garbage. There was garbage bags that were not being taken out. And I said, why don't you take this out? And you just said, I just can't do it.
I couldn't do it.
And there was dishes, there was stink in there.
Yep.
And then it was right around the same period where you shit yourself on purpose.
I don't think I ever really did that.
Oh, you don't?
I used to do a joke about that, but I don't think I ever really did that.
Okay.
I used to think about it like just shitting my pants and then cleaning it up and chalking it up to experience.
Right. But there was all this.
I don't think I ever did that.
Okay, all right.
I don't think so. I might have. I don't know.
This interview with Louie was kind of the epitome of what podcasting could be. And I would argue since then is not, and nor should it be, because there's just certain things that maybe you shouldn't say because it might hurt people.
And that sort of must have imposed on your sense of narcissism to have that responsibility. And I think the struggle of that first special, which I think redefined you, was you struggling with the fact that you might have a problem, a competitive problem with your children.
Right.
They were an imposition on your life.
Yeah, I mean,
but you loved them.
Yes. Well, they were an imposition because I loved them.
Yeah.
If I didn't care about them, there wouldn't have been an issue.
You'd just be one of those dads. Yeah, I got kids.
Yeah.
I don't know what
I
they're
can't really
doing.
spend much time with them, but they're there somewhere. I mean, like when you read about people, famous, great guys from the past, and their kids just were completely and utterly ignored by them.
And fucked up now.
And everybody just thinks that was a byproduct of how great that person was, and we all give them a pass for it. That's the way a lot of people think of that.
But I also remember a lot of this impetus about how you were going to handle kids and how you were going to break a pattern was that your father split.
Yeah, I wasn't going to do what my dad did. I also just, it was a huge thing for me, because I always thought that every second of my life should be poured into work and doing what I want to do. And
winning.
Stuff. Yeah, and yet, well, I never looked at it that way. I've always been obsessed with the things the projects that I'm doing.
Right.
I always get obsessed with them as work. I never really had this thought of like, I want to be the best, or I want to be seen, or I want to be recognized. I just really wanted to keep being able to do what I do. I love the work.
Yeah.
And part of the work is showing it to an audience. I never would want to exist in a vacuum and not. To me, the whole point is bringing this shit to crowds and making them laugh.
Right.
But anyway, I had seen a lot of like 60 Minutes episodes where they talk about a guy like Bill Parcells or whoever, and he just look at how he's so manic and he's so amazing. And then they talk to his wife, and she always has this kind of smile and says, "We just know that we don't see Bill from September 1st to
The rest
February
of it.
15th.
Yeah.
And that's, you make a deal with yourself that that's okay, and I love him. And they always say, and then at the end of the episode, Morley Safer says they're divorced now.
Yeah.
So I always remember that, and seeing the kids going, Dad loves football, and not much else.
Yeah.
And I always thought that's really not okay. If you're going to have kids, you should don't have kids if you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I didn't. When I had my daughter, when her mother had her in front of me, everything changed. I just fell in love with this kid. I just felt. I remember she was screaming in the delivery room, really upset. She seemed particularly upset. I mean, kids are supposed to cry when they're born, but she seemed angry to me and upset. Like I expected, just when a kid's crying in the delivery room, everybody's smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, look at her cry, But I was really upset for her.
Yeah.
And they put her on this little table, and they're putting stuff around her. Sorry.
It's all right.
Unexpectedly emotional. It's not a story that I tell a lot, so.
It's all right, man.
Let me have some water. Water's good. It washes away your love for your children, so you can talk without a shaking voice. Yeah, they put her on this little table, and they're fucking jabbing shit into her, and they're just rough with her, and she's screaming, and her mother, it was a C-section, so her mom was being sewn up. Her mom was just taken away.
Right.
And I'm like in the middle of this. I'm between her mother, like, do I care for also, her mother is who I'd been caring for. She'd been pregnant for 9 months, and I'd been caring for her.
Yeah.
And it all had been about her, the mother. The thing that happens when you have a baby is, for the better part of a year, you live with pregnancy.
Right.
And it's all about that.
Right.
And then you sort of feel when the woman's in labor, you just think this is about getting this woman through this.
Right.
And when it's done, we're going to go, that she and I are going to go home.
Right. Yeah.
You really don't, as much as you think you understand, you don't really understand that someone else
You just know you got to go to the hospital.
You got to go to the hospital and get through this thing that we've been taking classes about. We've been reading books about it.
Yeah.
I've been coping with her emotional instability and her volatile, suddenly we're going to build a new kitchen. I got to go buy wood, I mean, stuff like that. And she was really into her pregnancy, and I was there with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just don't know till you see the kid's face that there's somebody who's now going to be with you for the rest of your fucking life.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know how that would feel. But when she came out, it wasn't about my feelings.
Yeah.
It was, this kid is scared shitless, and she's really angry of being taken out of her mom.
Yeah.
And I was pulled for 1 second. There's this woman that's been the center of all this.
Yeah.
She just got cut in fucking half in front of me.
Yeah.
They just made a hole in her belly and took this kid out. And she's being sewn up, and she's alone.
Yeah.
And this kid's over there, and she's alone, and I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
So I went to the kid.
Yeah.
And I got my head next to hers,
Yeah.
and I said, she's screaming, purple face.
Yeah.
I said, it's okay, it's okay. You're
Yeah.
going to be okay. It's
Yeah.
all right. I'm here.
Yeah.
And she stopped screaming on a dime, turned and looked right at me.
Uh-huh.
And, kids can't see an inch in front of them until they're like a couple weeks old.
Yeah.
But she turned her head and opened her eyes and looked at me and stopped crying.
Oh, my God.
And everybody, all these practiced
Yeah.
people said, oh, my God, she heard you. One person said she heard you, and then one woman who I didn't know what was, I just heard a voice say, she knows who you are.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah.
And then somebody at that moment stuck a fucking pin in her foot or something and had blood and just screamed again. But I didn't understand that I had a role in this kid's life until that moment.
Right.
And so it became about this kid.
Mm-hmm.
And she changed everything. And one way that she changed it was I expected her to be unhappy. I figured my whole...
In general?
Yeah, just because she lived in someone's belly and she was this, living this perfect life. And then you're taken out to where your skin is raw and being hit by the atmosphere and you cough all the time.
Yeah.
And you just, what an awful life. That's the way I always looked at it. Like, it's just terrible. And the moment you're born, you're coping.
Yeah. Right out of the gate.
You must just be
this
awful.
is it. Yeah.
You shit and piss and just diapers and just what an awful life. But after that bout of crying, she was, within an hour she was breastfeeding and she was happy.
Yeah.
I watched her eat her first meal and I watched her shit her first shit. Like I saw the system start working right in front of me.
Right.
And she dealt with it beautifully.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by her.
Well, it's interesting that
having a positive attitude about life.
Well, that moment where I think that happens when you're primarily want to have control of your life and the people in your life, and to a certain degree, and that you were there for your wife, and that moment of concern where you realize like there is this raw life in front of you.
Yeah.
And on some level, outside of you being the father, you really have no control.
No, I just had huge sympathy for this kid.
Right.
That was the main feeling that I had, and everything started to flow from that. And I also found out. I mean, I don't like babies as a human. Like I'm not wired for that. And before I had kids, I was really worried about having kids because I don't like being around babies. I didn't like them. I didn't feel sympathy for babies. In the past.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how I would get. I thought it would just be taxing to be have someone screaming or crying, to not be allowed to things on paper that about being a parent. You don't sleep very much. They get you up in the middle of the night. I was like,
you knew all that.
Yeah, and I was like, I can't do that. Pregnancy gives you some training for that because your wife gets up in the middle of the night. She has to pee. She needs help.
Yeah.
Pregnancy is like a perfect training program for having a kid. It's the closest you can get anyway. But anyway, what I learned was that I could do it all. I didn't mind getting up. I didn't mind being bleary and unsleepy. I didn't mind her screaming and crying because I just had sympathy for her because I wanted her to be okay. So I found out that I'm a patient person. I didn't know any of this about myself. I'm a patient person, that I had capacity for love, for giving love and affection that I didn't know that I had, and receiving it, and that I was really interested in teaching her and talking to her and interacting with her, all this stuff that I never knew I had. So it made me, and all this stuff about my own anxiety about my life just went away because I didn't give a shit. I instantly knew that I'm going to get old and die, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore because it's about her now. It's about giving her a chance to be happy and have her own confidence in her own life. That's what it became about. But it was a struggle that I didn't give up without a fight, like you said.
The podcast was a major moment for both comedians, particularly for Maron. It wasn't just a great episode. It was a turning point that cemented Marc Maron as one of the best interviewers around. For Maron, it was deeply personal. It felt like it was an opportunity for him to rehash his resentment for Louie, who he actually knew when he was younger throughout their careers, but who had gone on to great success while Maron felt left behind in relative obscurity.
Yeah, and I said, that's fucking great. And you were like, I didn't even do the whole bit.
Right.
And it didn't matter that you were able to take what was fundamentally an absurd understanding of things and the way you created imaginary scenarios to sort of do your observational comedy and apply that same sense of poetry to real life struggles and conflicts. And it's always there.
Yeah.
So it's just an evolution of your creativity.
No, and I learned through this shit I did early on how to build jokes and how to make stuff work. Yeah. I mean, I think I still use the same fundamental skills that I had then, but I'm just applying them to something that people actually want to hear about for the first time, I think.
And I think that comics should know, if you're listening, and regular people, that the way you work now is that you literally let your old material die.
Yeah, I kill it every year. About every year.
What, literally, like you force yourself, you say like
never do it again. Yeah.
And you hold to that.
Yeah, for the most part. I do. I've had a few shows where I've crossed myself and said sorry to whoever I'm supposed to say sorry to and did an old bit. But it's rare. This is the hardest time I've had so far doing that.
Well, what's this, your 5th hour?
The conversation really resonated with listeners. It wasn't just about hanging out with your buds. It wasn't about making jokes. It wasn't about produced segments. It was about raw, unfiltered conversation. It helped Maron break into the mainstream. He was someone that people were talking about. He went on to have his own TV show on IFC.
You guys are wearing costumes, and I'm the idiot. That guy's got elf ears on. The wrong color elf ears. Racist. Wait a minute. Maron.
Shows on Netflix like Glow.
Hello, ladies. I'm Sam Sylvia, and this is Glow.
It also led to President Obama, while in office, going on the podcast in 2015, which caused its own stir and controversy.
That's a long shadow, and that's still part of our DNA. That's passed on. We're not cured of it. Racism. We are not cured of.
Clearly.
And it's not just a matter of it not being polite to say nigger in public.
That was unheard of at the time for a medium that people didn't even know really existed 5 years prior to have a sitting president going on a podcast. The Louis C.K. interview also led to the New York Times profiling Marc Maron. The podcast has also been called the best podcast episode ever by certain publications that I need to look up now. The interview became one of WTF's most popular episodes and arguably one of the most famous podcast episodes ever. It really cemented the power of podcasting and having these raw, intimate conversations. From interviewing a comedian at the top of his game to being profiled in the New York Times to getting a show on IFC and Netflix and specials on HBO and interviewing the president and pretty much every celebrity you can think of. Arguably, this is the most important podcast episode that ever happened in Marc Maron's life and completely changed his career. If you have suggestions of other things you want me to do a deep dive on here, please let me know. Go ahead and follow me at Eric Berry Comedy, and some exciting things to announce coming up. Till then, see you then.